unions, their interest is creating or keeping good jobs for their members. So that's what they're focused on. Environmental groups oppose it, as you say, because it damages our environment. I would love to see, as what I think a lot of people on the left, a union system that's a lot broader, that takes a lot more into account. That being said, I can't fault labor unions for doing what they can to keep their jobs. So I can only weigh in personally on this and say that I would oppose it, again, because it damages the environment, and there's other options for job creation here. I mean, personally, I think that if you look at all the research and development that's being done in sustainable energy sources, like wind and solar and water sources, it's incredible. And so it really makes any further damage to the environment through projects that involve dirty energy totally inexcusable. So I would oppose it on that basis. If we're gonna be creating jobs in the energy sector, they've got to be in sustainable energy.
Well, I mean, that question kind of goes back to the previous question about jobs overseas and jobs over here. First, I'd just like to note that it's not just creating, it's not just existing jobs. The oil pipeline extension was estimated to create new jobs, 10,000 to 20,000 just straight away in labor construction, and then to reverberate throughout the economy to about 100,000 jobs. Now, no one can tell the future. These are just estimates. But on the other side of the issue, Canada is now negotiating with China to put that oil into tankers, which has a much worse record when it comes to oil spills. And when it gets to their economy with less regulations, it's going to be worse overall for the environmental impact. So that's just my personal opinion on the issue.
Yeah, I'd like to see everyone, including the unions and governments, take environment into account and take sustainable energy and jobs into account. Again, I would say that I agree that we want to create jobs, good jobs, union jobs, but I think that we can also do it through energy projects that are sustainable.
So shifting focus just a little bit to expand philosophically about progressivism, the left, and OWS. How do you see rights and liberties? And let me follow that up with the classical liberal sense that our founders of this country spread around and talked about, was that we have certain rights that come from God, and that we each are sovereign, and those rights cannot be taken away from us. Which is sort of an argument for limited government. By definition, if we have these rights and they're not the rights of the government, then it can't, there's a lot of things government can't do. So are rights, in your sense, classically liberal, or are they something man-made and thus relative?
Again, I want to just clarify that I don't speak for Occupy Wall Street on this, but personally, I try to keep God out of my political theories, because I think it's really easy, once you ascribe anything involving politics to God, it's really easy for that to creep into what I just think is right thing. It's easy to stop thinking about it and just to go with, what I think is right, or what I've seen on TV, or what benefits me is just right. Now, it's a little bit too easy in my mind, so I try to keep God out of that. And personally, I absolutely think the concept of rights is man and woman made, and I don't think that diminishes their importance. I think that all of our conceptions are of our own making, of politics, of economics, of social behavior. There might be a lot to it. A lot of in terms of our own evolution, or our own. Maybe you don't want me to use that word. I don't know, but our own. Let me just say cultural evolution. But But nonetheless, they do come from us, I believe. And I also don't think that diminishes their importance. I don't think it has to come from a supernatural being in order to be really important for people to have certain rights and liberties.
You don't think it puts us in danger if we conceptualize rights as coming from us, as being a social construct, then you don't think that leads to the slippery slope of a totalitarian, whether right-wing or left-wing, doesn't matter, but totalitarian government taking away those rights at a certain point, saying, hey, they're just social constructs anyway?
I don't think so, because totalitarian governments don't tend to operate on purely philosophical bases. And I think that theological totalitarianism is just as possible as secular totalitarianism. I mean, if not more possible. It's just as easy to use God, in other words, to take people's rights away as it is to use humanity, I guess you could say, to take people's rights away. So I don't think that's a concern that way. I also don't think most totalitarian governments feel the need to philosophically justify their actions.
Well, it's not a totalitarian government by any means, but just to provide a more concrete example, in Britain recently, a soccer player was fined for using racial epithets.
Right.
The founding fathers, rightly or wrongly, I think rightly, believed in your freedom of conscience, your ability to say things and to believe things that were displeasurable to other people. They don't have that understanding of liberty in Great Britain, but do you think that's an example of government overreach? The possibility that someone may go to jail for saying something that's not liked by other people?
I think it's getting into the issues of government action based on people's speech is complicated. And we can get to that in a second. As far as it relating to the issue of God-given rights, I don't think it's related. I mean, the founding fathers also, a lot of them believed in slavery. So, and I don't think that's a good idea. I also don't think that if we bring God into it, then again, if you get into the Old Testament, there's a lot of slavery in there as well. But let's not open that door. I don't think slavery is a good idea, and I think most of us agree slavery is not a good idea. Yet, a lot of the founding fathers did believe in slavery and owned slaves. So I don't think we necessarily have to take it too much to heart that the exact wording of certain things that they said or wrote. That doesn't mean I'm throwing out everything they said or wrote, but I think we have to take that into account. As far as finding someone for using that sort of language, I'm not too familiar with the case. I do know there's a lot going on with that over there. I know Scotland is now trying to totally ban any sort of racial or cultural or sexual or religious epithets in any sporting events. I think that I agree that that freedom of speech is a good idea, and that should extend pretty far and wide. But there are exceptions that everyone, the cliche is screaming fire in a crowded theater, because it can harm people. People can get trampled or panic or whatever. And it also harms people to hurl racial epithets. It can harm people on a pretty deep level. So when it comes to someone who represents, in a way, the country, as soccer, football in Great Britain is that important, I think it's not necessarily a huge reach to say there's certain limits to what you can say.
So we're going to take a break right now. After the break, our last final questions.